October 14, 1806 was a terrible day for Frederick Lewis. For long he had believed that he was a better fighter than the French general Napoleon Bonaparte. But on this very Tuesday, when both of them met near the town of Jena, Frederick Lewis seemed not to be prepared for the demon he was confronting. I'll tell you how this battle ended in a few minutes. For now, let's see how it all started. Born on 31st January 1746, Frederick Lewis began his military career as a boy, serving in the last years of the 7-Year War, which happened between 1756 to 1763. In 1775, Frederick was elevated to lieutenant colonel, and shortly before King Frederick the Great died in 1786, he was promoted to the rank of Major General. But there was a problem. Frederick and other Prussian generals hated Napoleon Bonaparte and were waiting for a chance to crush him. That chance came in August of 1806. King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia was tired of Napoleon's broken promises and decided to declare war on France within 6 weeks. Frederick Lewis and other generals were happy. Fighting and defeating Napoleon Bonaparte was the dream of their lives. But there was another problem. Frederick Lewis and other generals in Prussia were methodical people. They made diligent war strategies based on their past experiences and fight their opponents systematically. Napoleon Bonaparte, on the other hand, was an erratic man who seems to delete from his memory the strategies of the previous battle. On October 5, 1806, a few days before the king was to declare war, disturbing news reached Frederick Lewis and other Prussian generals. Napoleon's army, which they believed was dispersed, had marched east, merged, and was massing deep in southern Prussia. Before the generals had time to adjust their plans, Napoleon's army suddenly wheeled north, heading straight for Berlin, the heart of Prussia. The confused generals argued and argued, moving their troops here and there, trying to decide where to attack. Just before they got their head around what was going on October 14, 1806, near the town of Jena, Napoleon caught up with Frederick Lewis. Even though both generals had similar numbers of soldiers, Frederick Lewis's men were methodical and experienced fighters who followed the order and used best practices. Napoleon's men, on the other hand, operated without a standard operating manual or method. Like a chameleon, they changed their plans as the need arises. Before they were able to use the medicine they had made, Frederick Lewis soldiers and Prussians quickly crumbled, one fortress falling after another. The king fled for his life, and Frederick Lewis also ran for safety. In a matter of days, virtually nothing remained of the once mighty Prussian army. Frederick Lewis was like most of us. He was a good general, but he depended on yesterday's tactics to win today's battle. Napoleon Bonaparte, on the other hand, was like water. He changed forms and transformed himself depending on what or who he was fighting with. It doesn't matter whether it's starting a business, becoming a writer, becoming a musician, a successful politician, or pursuing any other career path, most of us are like Frederick Lewis. We either try to copy someone who is already successful in our field, or keep using the strategies that have made us successful in the past. The problem with this approach is that life changes so fast. The business strategies that worked last 3 years in your industry are now obsolete, and the successful people we are copying have been copied by too many people already. In his 2014 book, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel wrote, and I quote, "Every moment in business happens only once. The next Bill Gates will not build an operating system. The next Larry Page or Sergey Brin won't make a search engine. And the next Mark Zuckerberg won't create a social network. If you're copying these guys, you aren't learning from them." And that's the point of this video. Life is difficult for most of us because we always follow the crowd and always do things the way everyone else does it. Life is difficult because at some point in our individual lives, we will have to reinvent ourselves. At some point in your life, you will have to try something new, do something different, take some risks. dare the unknown, and go where nobody goes. While going where nobody goes seems painful and difficult, remaining a conformist eventually makes your life even more difficult. In his 1841 book, Self-Reliance, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "Whoso will be a man must be a nonconformist." The problem, however, is that it is against our very nature as humans to be a nonconformist, or to go where nobody goes and expose ourselves to uncertainties. Psychologists call this the status quo bias. The status quo bias is a cognitive bias that makes people prefer that things stay as they are, or that the current state of affairs remains the same often because we're loss averse. Let me give you an example. Let's call this man James. James started a furniture business in the year 2013, and he seemed to do a few things right because so many people visit his showroom and buy his furniture. Now, the next problem James would have is that, like Frederick Lewis, he would build doctrines and habits around those things that have been working for him. James serves coffee for anyone who comes to his showroom, for example. He hires beautiful ladies who welcome every client like a king, and even gives his customer free delivery anytime they buy from him. These are things James is doing right, which made him sell more furniture than anyone in his city. The problem, however, is that, well, nothing lasts forever. Other furniture makers will soon copy James' strategies, and a new generation of customers will soon emerge who no longer appreciate free coffee. Before you know it, James' furniture business begins to lose customers, and life starts becoming difficult for him. This is the whole idea of Spencer Johnson's 1998 book, Who Moved My Cheese? In Who Moved My Cheese, Spencer Johnson wrote, "If you do not change, you can become extinct." Okay, let's see another example. Let's call this lady Rachel. Rachel wants to start a YouTube channel because she knows how successful this lady, and this lady are on YouTube. The next thing Rachel will do is to study what these three women are doing, the kind of content they're creating, or even the way they shoot their videos, and start following their strategies. The problem, however, is that too many people have copied these people's strategies and are currently making the kinds of content they are making. The market is tired of another Me Too. So, the viewers now have different taste, and the old formula can no longer catch their attention. On page 18 of his 2006 book, The 33 Strategies of War, Robert Greene wrote, "As we grow older, we become more rooted in the past. Habits take over. Something that has worked for us in the past become a doctrine. Repetition replaces creativity. Generally, as we become adults, we become less creative. We choose more predictable routes and form doctrines around what has worked in the past. And even though studies like this found that creativity is the most important skill in our world today, George Land's 1968 study found that only 2% of adults are creative. Only 2% of us have the courage to try new things. Only 2% of us are ready to move when the cheese moves. Only 2% of us are strong enough to go where nobody has been. And these are the few who rule our world." Take Margaret Thatcher, for example. Before she joined British politics in 1950s, the political arena wasn't for women. In fact, there's an account on page 53 of her biography, written by John Campbell, in which Margaret was asked whether she would like to be the first female prime minister. Her answer was simple: "There will never be a woman prime minister in my lifetime." But Thatcher knew how to strike a new path and go where nobody had been. For example, starting in politics, her clothes were prim, more like a housewife's than a politician's. Before her, it was customary that British politicians criticized their opponents courteously, but Thatcher would do the opposite. She would confront and attack her opponents directly.
But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! No, no, no.
In the winter of 1978 to 1979, several public sector unions decided to strike. While other politicians talk smooth and babysit the electorate, Thatcher said whatever she wanted to say. Yeah, like this grandpa, you know. But the electorate loved it because it was new, strange, and sounded genuine. Thatcher became the Prime Minister of the UK on May 4th, 1979, and led her country for over a decade. Think about the Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei. At the beginning of the 17th century, the way Renaissance scientists made money was to present their inventions as gifts to the leading patrons at the time, the kings and the nobilities. But Galileo wished to change that because it was not a lucrative business model. In 1610, Galileo hit a new strategy when he discovered the moons of Jupiter. Instead of dividing the discovery among his patrons, giving one the telescope he had used, dedicating a book to another, and so on as he has done in the past, he decided to focus exclusively on the Medicis. After dedicating the whole discovery to Medici, Galileo commissioned an emblem representing Jupiter and presented this to the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo II. That same year, in 1610, Cosmas II made Galileo his official philosopher and mathematician with a full-time regular salary. Suddenly, instead of depending on the mercy of the kings before he ate, Galileo now had a stable income, which would allow him to concentrate more on his inventions. Philosopher Miyamoto Musashi, born in 1584, by age 21, he had made a name for himself as a great swordsman. Musashi defeated everyone he fought with, whether it was Yoshioka Matashishiro, which he killed in 1605, Baikin, or Sasaki Ganryu, which he killed on April 13, 1612. But Musashi's strategy was simple: fight each battle with a different strategy. In his 1645 book, A Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi wrote, "Go alone to places frightening to the common brand of men." Again, this is the point of this entire video. If you want life to be easy for you, you have to first make it a little difficult for yourself. You have to break some status quo. You have to try what other people in your industry don't want to try. You have to go where nobody else wants to go. You have to break some rules and change the rules. You have to go to places frightening to everyone else. You have to move, even before your cheese moves. You have to learn, adapt, change, and reinvent yourself every now and then. To be able to do this effectively, you'll have to be courageous and creative, which is the reason I made the video on your screen now. The video on your screen teaches you how to be creative and the 4 stages you have to go through if you want to reinvent yourself and create something unique from what everyone is creating.